hang out at?
I have a bar that's walking distance. I go right across the street.
I have a.
It is. No getting in the car. None of that.
That's right. Don't get in the car. And we'll come back and talk to you about our bars after this. Hi, Christy.
Hi, Jeff.
We're recording now.
The many hours of conversation you and I have had, we've had probably half of them that haven't been recorded.
You know what we should do? We should start a podcast.
You think? Let's call it the Why and the Buy. How's that?
Right. And we're back. It's the Why and the Buy. Hi, Christy.
Hi, Jeff. How's it going?
I'm doing great, actually. I was going to ask you a different cold open question. I was going to ask you about your ceiling. Do you have a ceiling on your career? Do you have a ceiling on your attitude, on your potential?
Hell no.
Okay. Well, I do have to remind you that I have a floor. And that floor right upstairs from me right now, which is functioning as a ceiling, is occasionally getting pounded on because, well, the guys that came to do the floor are doing the floor today. And the good news is they're going to be done today, and that's great. But the bad news is there might be an occasional knock or bang that you may hear, and we're going to try to minimize that. Hi, Doug, about taking care of that stuff as you go through that. So my apologies in advance here, but we've got a very important interview today. And I want to introduce the audience to Derrick Williams with 3Link Sales. I found Derrick on Instagram. And that is not a place I find very many people when it comes to selling, because Instagram is just a place that I occasionally visit to look at pictures of golf courses and beer, I think is essentially what it's looked like lately. But that's where I put pictures of my kids and my friends and stuff. So I see Derrick, and I'm looking at this stuff, and it's passionate, and it is inspirational, and it is on point. And so I reached out to Derrick, and I love what he's doing. So Derrick was kind enough to join us here. So hi, Derrick.
Hello. Thanks for having me, Jeff. It's good to be here. But yes, Instagram is that's the bar I go to. So it's the bar I'm trying to pick up my target audience at.
I love that analogy. And I saw, I think it was an Instagram post where you had screenshot something from. I almost said screenshotted. I had to catch myself there. But you screenshot something from LinkedIn, and you had this kind of very eloquent explanation of, look, LinkedIn's where you have to go. Instagram's where people want to go. So where are the people I'm trying to reach going when they don't want to be reached? And I'm like, this is brilliant. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, to tell you a little bit about that, let me tell you a little bit more about what I'm trying to achieve. And with 3Link, the focus is sales training, sales consulting, and independent sales services. So it's 3 lines of service, given the 3. But the sales training component and the sales consulting element have to do with sales development as a practice and a profession out in the space. So my thought process, and after working with a lot of sales development teams and knowing that sales development traditionally, and for the most part, is a area where entry-level salespeople are coming in. So I would say the young crowd. And having 3 teenage daughters of my own, I can still somewhat relate. And I know, and I believe that these people who are coming into the sales world, and I'm trying to target people who are new to sales, I think that they're going to LinkedIn because they have to. It's a checkbox, if you will. I helped my daughter not too long ago. She's 20 years old, set up her LinkedIn profile. She had already been on Snap. She had already been on Instagram. She had been on Facebook. She's already living the social media lifestyle, but it wasn't until she grew up at 18, 20 that she started feeling like I have to do a LinkedIn profile. So based on that thought process, I'm saying that people are living inside of Instagram. They're living inside of Snapchat. The same way you're putting up pictures of your kids, so are everyone else, just like myself. And so that's their comfort place. And if you look at LinkedIn, and I'm not trying to bash LinkedIn, I love the platform. My point is that it's congested, it's very professional, it has its purpose. But someone who's new into the space, if I want to relax and be myself, I'm doing that on Instagram. And so we know from a targeting perspective, you want to create awareness and do the inbound marketing aspect and this creative following, you want to go where people are. And so I think that the audience that I'm trying to target is hanging out on Instagram.
So Derrick, I know that when I look at your profile, you talk about sales development reps and building that type of team. You also talk about inside sales management. That's been prevalent throughout your career. Help me understand the difference between the two.
Yeah, well, one real easy difference is one creates revenue and seals the deal, if you will. So they will, have a revenue quota. That's an inside salesperson. They're actually, cultivating relationships and typically carrying a revenue quota and closing deals in the sense of getting a purchase order, getting a credit card order, getting some sort of business transacted. So that's an inside salesperson. And that's typically the next step in the career of a sales development person. So a sales development person is what we called back in the day a meeting setter. And then I don't want to downplay their purpose because there's a lot more that goes into it. But just for simplistic purposes, I would see your sales development person as the one whose targeted outbound effort is to create quality engagements with target personas, right? So decision makers. If you're trying to get with a CISO or a cybersecurity solution, then they're going to be helping augment the salesperson's efforts, because the sales development person typically is always working in alignment with an outside salesperson, someone who's the face to the client. And so on behalf of that salesperson, I'm calling on prospects, trying to get meetings set up for that outside salesperson to come in and give you his pitch, right? And so there's a handoff involved.
So here's I'm going to tread lightly when I say this, but what you're describing, I know there's more to an SDR than just setting appointments, because when you're talking about setting appointments, that's what an administrative assistant does, right? I mean, that's an AA, not an SDR.
A very talented administrative
assistant. There's no question about that. But my perspective is, and the way that I have kind of seen the development of the SDR as I watch the managers complain about experienced reps not wanting to prospect anymore, and now this new wave, especially as it relates to tech sales, of new, young, hungry salespeople, wanting to wanting to grow up into sales professionals. To me, it's like the SDR becomes the Band-Aid on the problem of the experienced and talented salesperson just not essentially being lazy. That's what I've seen it painted as. And the other thing that I see, and this is the other edge of the sword that I don't like, is a couple years ago, I read Freakonomics. And I don't know if go check out the book. It's great. Like there's a lot of research in terms of how people act the way they do and why people act the way they do. But there was this whole piece that they did about why the crack dealers in Chicago all still live with their moms. And it's like, well, wait a second. If you're a drug dealer, there's supposed to be a lot of cash involved. There's supposed to be a lot of money involved. You're supposed to be able to grow into this kingpin, right? And everybody, when they get started, wants to be Scarface. And what you find is that a shockingly small percentage of people end up actually being Scarface, because you've got a certain quota you got to hit every month, and then you've got these people who are traditionally undisciplined, and they have poor upbringings, and they don't have a lot of support around them, and so you've got the temptation of the drug itself, and a lot of these crack dealers end up being their own best customers, and then they get themselves in trouble, and that carrot is dangled out in front of them, but it's never quite reachable. And I've seen that happen in some organizations. And I see some parallels there, and please excuse me if anybody is taking this entirely too personally. What I'm seeing is some trends here, and why does it need to be broken up? Shouldn't the experienced sales pro just be disciplined and professional enough, quite frankly, to do their own prospecting? And what does an SDR? Obviously, an SDR can do way more prospecting if that's their only job to do. But isn't there a certain amount of prospecting that lays the groundwork for the next step in the sales process? And then if that handoff is being made, how does the prospect perceive that handoff?
Right.
So that's what there's my diatribe. I'll shut my microphone off now.
No, I mean, you touched on a lot of interesting points, especially the crack analogy. Yes, some salespeople are lazy, and they take for granted that they have someone back at the office making their dials for them, no doubt, especially if you've grown up in an environment where you as an account executive, you've become to expect having a sales development rep. In a lot of other markets, medical device being one of them, that's not the case. So you have a complete polar opposite issue that you have to deal with. So we'll talk about that separately. But another thing is we don't replace their efforts, right? So we augment their efforts. The salesperson should absolutely still be prospecting, but that one person, typically in a startup environment where sales development is most prevalent, these salespeople have territories that are monstrous, right? They have the West Coast, right? They can't prospect to everybody, realistically speaking, right? And so in order to scale rapidly, because obviously these businesses are under a lot of pressure to grow by the board, they've taken on $50 million in loans and now they need to pay it back, right? So they're eager to create a growth engine that will keep the pipeline stimulated and with high fidelity so that their salespeople aren't running into 4x issues. You know, the old adage of make sure you keep your pipeline at 4x or greater. So that's the solution that we're driving. It's sort of an insurance policy, if you will, for a growth-minded company, is to ensure that you do grow, is you have full-time resources dedicated just to this function. And again, as a salesperson, you've been a salesperson, when you get into these sales cycles, particularly in big ticket sales, when you have a $250,000 ASP, $100,000 ASP, these are very long-winded sales cycles. They're very complicated. They have many stakeholders. And so just to get one deal done can consume a lot of your time, especially in a emerging technology environment where there's a lot of, you know, wires to connect together, if you will, interoperability issues with their environment, architecture issues. There's a lot of stakeholders on both sides of the table to get a deal done a lot of times. And so while that's happening, you still have coverage happening in the back end with your SDR, making those dials for you and keeping your calendar full. So when you walk out of that meeting, go into a new opportunity fresh right after that. And the way the customers perceive this, I think, if done right, they perceive it as only as a positive, because the inside outside sales mechanism isn't new, right? I mean, as Dell and big companies all have inside and outside salespeople, they have sales teams that support accounts. So unless you're a mom and pop, even a small, medium-sized business, I think they're all have become accustomed to a multi-touch sales process, right? The same way you have multiple stakeholders involved on the sales side, you're going to have multiple people involved. And if it's wired well, then when it's happening is you have a better experience for the customer. And so they end up preferring it, I think. And then another thing, I'll just jump in real quick. The path that you were talking about of not being able to actualize the promised land, if you will, of becoming an account executive, right? You come in as an SDR, and you know you're selling crack out of your mom's basement, and now you want to get to become Scarface, right? How do you make that jump? And you're right, that chasm going from SDR to account executive in a lot of companies, if not most companies, is really, really, really hard. Especially the environment I'm describing, where you have big sales ticket ASPs. These salespeople that are in the field, they've grown up in those territories, so they have the relationships. They have a Rolodex of people that they can call on, not just customers, but partners and other people that come to the company. And they have a deep expertise in that area, whereas this SDR is just coming on. So even if you're an SDR for 3 or 4 years, even if you make it into an inside sales role within that same company, jumping to the field is really hard because you still have to move most of the time, because these SDRs, which is a downside, I believe, of the current model that you see today, is they're all hubbed in one location in San Francisco or here in Santa Clara. Instead of doing what you should do and create a career path where you hire people remotely in these same markets where you have your salespeople. So as you lose salespeople, the talent that you farmed up can go and take those positions instead of starting fresh. So that's my theory on how the future of SDR might look, is having a distributed sales team.
And it's kind of risky for the company, right? Because if you have someone, say, in South Georgia or in Bakersfield, California, right, and they go away to get another individual at the same caliber, becomes a lot harder. That feeder system just isn't there the way it is in these big cities. And and until people have proven themselves, it's hard to justify putting them out in the field like that. Well, and it's interesting to me, do you find that most SDRs end up having to leave the organization they're with in order to move to that next level in their career?
I think that's the majority of the time. I think unless you're selling to small, medium-sized businesses and you're selling a small ticket sales product, and you have plenty of, territory around that area, the geographic area. Yeah, I think majority of the time SDRs are jumping. But the thing is, they shouldn't have to, right? I mean, the whole expensive guy in a suit, I won't touch, I know we haven't talked on this too much, but the future of sales, that guy is costing these companies a lot of money. So the inside sales model, I believe, and that's why I put my profession on it, is really where the future of sales is going to lie. You're going to have distributed sales teams in-house, and the expensive $250,000 guy, $500,000 guy is going to dwindle. It won't go away, but I think there's going to become less and less expensive suits in the field.
Why do you think that is?
Why are they? Because they're expensive. I mean, I think that talent-wise, it's hard to identify them, and I think that you can have 2 or 3 people generating, and that's just the old adage. Inside salespeople are less expensive typically, so you get greater margin.
Yeah, you get better margin, but can you get the same kind of performance, right? I mean, that was, I remember, and I'm making this point for the sake of discussion, really. I don't entirely disagree with you. Obviously, they are less expensive. I think there's still a reason, though, that the outside salesperson exists, and I think that there is still a talent. There's still, I mean, as much as we like to utilize social media and all the channels, we go to all the bars. Right. As much as we like to do that, there's still something to be said about sitting at an actual bar, having an actual cup of coffee with somebody and making that face-to-face connection there. And the in-person, the energy that is exchanged in person, it can't even be replaced by the video call that we're on right now. So I think there's always something to that. I think the reflection of or the evolution of the salesperson from an outside, I mean, we've gone from the days of door to door, right? From the outside to more of an inside based team is more reflective of the purchasing decisions that are being made and the way those purchasing decisions are being made, right? I said now, I mean, the floors are being done upstairs, and it sounds like the guys are on lunch or something, which is great. So we may get away unscathed. But someone came into my house. I needed to see the samples of this floor that was coming in. There's no way that you can. I mean, until you can produce a hologram via the web to my house from a remote location on Mars, right? We're not going to be able. I'm not going to be able to see what this stuff is going to look like in the light against my furniture, against my wall. So there's always going to be a role there, I think, at least in my lifetime. But I mean, is that...
But let me ask you this, though, Jeff. Let me ask you this. There's always a role. I don't think anybody will disagree. There's always going to be, as long as people exist and people are making transactions, they're going to prefer to deal with live people. There's no doubt in my mind. But do you think the gamut of that is going to shrink? I mean, do you think the number of people outside in the field that are, selling face-to-face shrinks?
I see where I think I see where you're going with this, and yes, I do. And I think the more we're getting to the point now we don't even need to go grocery shopping. Right.
Exactly.
I mean, like, not only are there services out there, we've used them a little bit, you pay the subscription and then they go and they do the shopping for you and someone delivers groceries right to your house. I mean, it's amazing, especially if you're, if you're injured or you just not feeling well or whatever, you still need to get the grocery shopping done. Now, Amazon buying Whole Foods and having drone deliveries within 2 hours. I mean, that's pretty awesome. So we're doing less and less in person. So I completely acknowledge that. Do you think, and this is where I thought you were going, do you think that it could get to a point where instead of the SDR or someone who functions in one specific role, like an SDR taking one part of the sales process,
right,
and being inside, are you suggesting that most of the selling is going to come on the inside and then the analog of an SDR will go out to present samples and get final approvals for things? Yes. That's where you think this is going. Okay.
With a combination of the onset of artificial intelligence and everything else that's happening, I think that's what augments it and drives it that direction. Yeah.
Well, and the client base is changing too, right? So they don't necessarily want to sit across the counter and have a cup of coffee or even sit at the bar, honestly. I mean, there are certainly those high touch, high involvement sales. There's no question that, that solution selling and highly integrated sales are going to continue to require that. but a lot of clients are putting up barriers for that type of interaction.
Oh, yeah. When's the last time you took a client to the bar? Well, you know how hard it is to get a coffee
Most
meeting?
of my clients are friends, so I do that a lot.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no. And I can tell you that too, that I've had clients sit at my bar in my house, like more often than I've been to like where I pay a bartender and like
Sure.
leave a tip,
Yeah.
right? Like nobody tips me
Yeah.
that well in my own house. It's kind of bad, but
I do it right.
those meetings and those interactions are really difficult to come by anymore because time is at such a premium. And I get so many people. I work with a lot of people who are reluctant to the idea that they're in sales or are very new to sales, and they have this idea that selling is about fancy dinners and rounds of golf and things like that. And I'm like, listen, no one wants to give you 5 hours. I don't care how nice of a golf course it is. And oh, by the way, if it's the nicest golf course in the state or if it's one of the top 100 or whatever, they're going to be way more interested in playing golf than they are talking to you about whatever you have, right? Thanks, buddy. I'll deny your next meeting request from now on, but really appreciate the afternoon. I mean, it's not what it's about. You know,
Yeah, and I'm not here to, say that technology is going to take over and sales as we know it will go away. But, the average salesperson is definitely under attack, right? If you don't take the career serious and start to, use all the resources that are available to you to get better and grow your career, then yeah, even as an outbound SDR, that function itself in its singularity is under attack. Really, I mean, it's only a matter of time before an automated, Alexa is calling prospects during the day to have a conversation with them about having a meeting. And I don't mean Alexa literally, but some
probably
platform. Right? InsideSales.com is probably brewing something up right now,
No question. That's been my biggest, and I tip my hat to you. What you shared with us just a few minutes ago is the most salient breakdown of what an SDR should do in a properly functioning environment that I've ever heard. It gets painted as something. And listen, I'm not everywhere on social media. I'm not at those bars all the time. So there are conversations about this that are happening that I'm just not aware of. And so thank you for enlightening me. But the ones that I am seeing are got to make 100 dials today. Well, you know who can make 1,000 dials in the time it takes you to make 10? It's Alexa or something like her. You know what I mean? And that's one of my biggest problems with the SDR is that when you eliminate so much of the spectrum of the selling process, you make yourself replaceable. And when you make yourself replaceable, you're begging to be replaced. And it's the antithesis really of selling, because the goal of being an integrated salesperson along that entire spectrum is to make yourself irreplaceable.
Well, I'll flip it around to you as well. And I'll say that the sales
You're really good at doing that.
Yeah, I am. But the salesperson is, they have the same problem, right? Like the only thing they're doing is taking an order now. Because that's the other side of our spectrum is if I've done the hard work of cracking open the door, gaining them interest, getting them fired up, you've done an excellent demo of the product itself is going to do a lot of the selling. He's going to do a lot of the selling himself, since 80% of the sales is happening online during his research. He's looking at forums. So the salesperson as a whole, the closer, if you will, is really just handing over a pen at the end of the day and saying, here, sign here, right? I mean, to simplify it, there's a lot that goes into it. Again, big ticket sales, completely different environment. But to simplify it, the hard work has been done in some ways. I've greased the wheels for you already up front so that you have propensity in your pipeline. So really, what value are you bringing now as the closer if I've already gotten them fired up?
I think the value that I bring as the closer is actually having the conversation and solving the problem, right? I mean, I carry the whole bag, right?
But your sales engineer does,
yeah, right. And where did the sales engineer go, right? Like that was something 5 years ago. It was all over the place. And now there's SDRs, and now there's customer care managers and specialists. And I just don't like the fact that it's all fragmented. And we talked a little bit about this before we started recording, but the idea that when things become fragmented, there are just different holes for contacts and prospects and customers to be lost through.
And to echo your point, the sales development practice is not done right if it's not aligned correctly. You see sales development reps celebrating success. Hey, I booked a bunch of meetings today. I created a bunch of new opportunities today. Meanwhile, the people that they're aligned to, the salesperson who's solving the problem, isn't hitting their quota or they're drowning, right? And so you're celebrating mediocre meetings that you've set with mediocre reps, prospects, I should say, while I'm, sucking on wind, if you will, trying to close my deals because the program hasn't been wired well together. The sales development rep and the outside salesperson haven't been able to gel. Whatever disconnect is happening because it's so fragmented, right? Because there's more things that can go wrong, like you said, when you do that. If you don't wire it well together, then absolutely it's going to become a poor experience for the prospect. Sales development reps aren't going to get promoted. They're not going to feel like they're adding value to the business. Sales reps are going to be, come to have animosity towards their SDRs because they're wasting so much of their time. They have so much garbage in their pipeline now. And their bosses are saying, well, you got all these meetings, you should be able to close. Well, I'm getting garbage meetings. And now they look like they're complaining because they're saying I'm getting garbage meetings. And so there's a big if with sales development. And that's why I believe that a company like mine with 3Link that's what I want to provide to the marketplace is let's look at the individual requirements of every business because no business is the same. Every business model has its own particular requirements. And I think that's the thing that plays true is everybody is trying to blanket sales development as this one thing, and it morphs depending on the model of business that you're in.
If you like us, tell us. Send us a message at The Why and the Buy on Twitter, or leave us a 5-star review on iTunes or wherever you got this podcast.
Jeff and I are beyond excited that you choose to spend your time with us each week. We'd love to hear from you. And we thank you again for your support and for your connection. Derrick, do you find that you're working with companies that are just starting a sales development team, or are you coming in to help kind of fix a model that may be broken?
A little bit of both. I mean, typically I've come in when there's 2 or 3 sales development reps that have already been hired by maybe a CMO or head of sales or a sales operations person, and they're doing their best to oversee the function, but they're not developing the people. They're making the calls. They have a Salesforce instance, and so they're kind of doing some stuff. But I come in to then expand that program from 2 or 3 people to 5, 6, 10, 15 people, and put the process, the tools, and the overall structure in place to make sure it's repeatable and delivering on the desirable outcomes.
Right. So it really touches every aspect of the sales process, right? So you have to get involved even with the external sales reps in order to make sure that gel takes place.
Oh, absolutely.
Right?
I mean, they're our customers, really. Mm-hmm. I mean, the salesperson, the account executive, the head of sales and his organization, that's my pool of customers. Those are my accounts. And so my level of engagement with the sales reps is vital. I make sure I have a really good relationship with them. I'm usually able to form a good level of respect with them because I've been in their shoes before. And so now I am here, mentoring the new guys. But yeah, so that you have the political play between inside and outside is difficult if it's not sort of like, I compare it somewhat to Salesforce adoption. You have salespeople in the field who won't update Salesforce, right?
Yes.
I'm in the field, whatever the situation might be. So trying to get them to adopt Salesforce is like getting them to adopt sales development in some ways, because it has to be top-down driven. If the CEO, the head of sales, isn't firmly behind the function of sales development, then you're going to have the issues that we've talked about today.
Sure. Well, you'll have mix-matched incentives, and there you get the kind of junk that gets pushed through the funnel to the to the poor guy on the outside that's trying to sit across from the wrong client.
Well, and then going to come back and make excuses too. I mean, and that's the thing. The more you try to break apart the individual roles of the selling process or the individual roles within the selling process, the more conversation and communication there have to be between those title holders and those role players. So in some senses, in some senses, in order to make things more simple within each role, the overall process gets a little more complicated because you have more people to work in. And when the overall process gets more complicated, fewer people understand it, so you start painting with broad brushes. Fewer people buy into it because it's different, and then you get people making excuses, and then it's, well, I want the Glengarry leads. Where are the Glengarry leads? I don't want these. These are, you're scheduling a bunch of garbage meetings for me. Who are you? And then salty sales guy in the field who doesn't quite understand it starts asking for SDR rep's head. SDR is only doing what he's been told. Right. But maybe she's new. And so she's created a bunch of meetings. She doesn't know what a good lead is. I mean, she's new. She's cutting her teeth. And then if I'm an account executive, do I want a brand new SDR? I don't know. I got to train someone. You know what I mean? Like, and it's, I don't, and I don't mean to be grumpy curmudgeon who just doesn't understand the process, because I've learned a ton here today. I think that, like anything, something is new, it starts to work, and then everybody's all over the bandwagon. And then when what I've seen time and time again is that as we kind of get a grasp of what it really is, we realize that the sales process is the sales process. And this is another way to work within it. It's another way to work through it. And it's tremendously successful when everybody knows what their role is and is interested in doing it.
Well, I think that's the critical element, right? Is that everybody's got to be crystal clear. And I think if it's the difference between succeeding and blowing it out of the water, right? So it's that hyper growth mode. And Jeff, you and I've been living in the small business world for a few years now. Derrick, you've been living both full-time and as a side hustle in the small business world for a few years now. We all know what it's like when you're focused on doing the business and you stop prospecting for the next clients that are going to come down the line. If you don't have someone who's there to kind of pull that piece of it away so that you can stay hyper-focused on the things that make the most impact in the business, then it's a challenge. So what we really are talking about is not necessarily that the splitting up of the role is wrong, but it's the culture and the cultivation within the organization that is doing that isn't supporting it effectively. So if people don't know what they're supposed to do, they don't have a good barometer to judge whether or not they are truly being successful. It's not just a numbers game. And they aren't incentivized to work with each other, then yeah, it's going to fail, but it was going to fail anyway. You were only going to be successful for a period of time. You certainly weren't going to grow exponentially if you were going to try and hoard everything to one individual.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I stopped prospecting because I'm too busy yelling at kids to get off my lawn. That's my biggest problem.
Well, you and Clint Eastwood, right?
Awesome. Derrick, this has been a lot of fun. I've learned a lot. Thank you for coming on.
I don't know. I think we kind of complained a lot. Did we complain a lot?
Hey, welcome to my world. Welcome to the world. Trust me. I am a therapist in another life, I feel.
Excellent. I love it. That's really what we all do, right? Is therapy. It's all just sales therapy.
Right. No, but I appreciate the candor and the levity as well. Sales development, it can be a double-edged sword, like you say, Jeff. It can hurt you, or it can help you scale. It's what you make it. Just like sales is in general. It's kind of what you make it. But this has been fun. I really appreciate the invite to do this. Hopefully we can connect again real soon.
Oh yeah, I mean you're doing great work. That's clear. And I want to tell people, go to Instagram. Go to 3link_sales and follow Derrick, because he's sharp and the stuff that he puts out there is good. It's motivational. It's inspirational. It's all the ationals that you can think of. And Derrick, before we say goodbye here, we got to ask you, we ask everybody else, but why do you do this? What's your why?
My why, it's a big question. It's multifaceted. So I have 3 daughters, as you can imagine. That's enough of a why in itself. My oldest actually just less than a year ago gave birth. So I'm actually a grandfather as well.
Oh, yay.
Hey,
so
congratulations.
Congrats.
My legacy is definitely a big part of my why. But I started off in sales early in life. My dad was in sales. And I've had some really shitty sales managers in my time. I've had some really good ones. And that's why I got into sales management specifically early on in my career, pounding the pavement, making 150 calls a day, doing all the aggressive, hardcore sales that had to be done. The mentors in my life made the difference. And so I feel like I can do that for people who are new to sales. And that's what I hope to do, is just help people overcome those fears of prospecting and asking for orders and just being a salesperson. Because, for some people, they wake up with a nicky feeling about it. And I think, the more pride that we put into this profession, the easier it will be for those that are coming in.
Yeah. And remind them not to watch Glengarry Glen Ross.
Love it.
Whatever you do, do not watch that movie.
Well, just at least watch the Alec Baldwin speech.
Yes. Yeah, it's a great movie for a lot of reasons that people don't understand, but it's a really.
I think it's pretty damn depressing. But speech, man, that speech takes.
Oh, that's awesome, Derrick. Thank you for being here. If you are listening right now, go follow Derrick on Instagram. And I don't know if he wants, connect with you on LinkedIn, follow you on Twitter.
Yeah, LinkedIn, 3linksales.com is the website.
There you go.
There's a YouTube channel. I'm on Twitter, but my main platform that I'm focused on is on Instagram. So that's where you can find me every day.
Awesome.
Excellent.
So
excellent.
Go follow Derrick. After you follow Derrick, follow Christie. And if you can't find Christie, then send Christie an email and say, get on Instagram, Christie, get with it. And
I am on Instagram, but it's iCore Strategy, not Christie Walters. Yes.
Okay, so follow 3link_sales, follow Derrick.
Yes.
Then follow Christie. I don't care if you follow me. It's just pictures of my kids and golf courses. And
you with a big tiger behind your head. Right?
I did take a tiger selfie. That was pretty cool.
It was a cool pic.
That was pretty cool. After you're done following us all on Instagram, go like the podcast, share the podcast, subscribe to the podcast, tell your friends about the podcast, send us an email, info@thewhyandthebuy.com. We had a success story that we'll share at another date, but someone that Christie and I worked with for a very short time who needed just a little bit of a nudge sent me a message the other day that she hit her number ahead of schedule.
Yay!
And I was fired up.
Shout out to Mary Pat.
That's right. So we're going to get her back on really quickly because I challenged her with a little bit more extreme of a goal for the next quarter. But if you like what we're doing, tell us, subscribe, share us. And Christie, I think we're all set. Derrick knows his whys.
He does, because when you know your why, your hows and your whats get much better. Thanks, Derrick.
Thank you, guys. You guys take care.
Thanks, everybody. We'll talk to you again soon.
I've told you twice. I told myself it doesn't matter.
99% of your success is rooted in your understanding and subsequent mastery of the fundamentals. I don't care what it is that you're doing. I was introduced to the fundamental principles of sales when I read Jeffrey Gitomer's Little Red Book of Selling back in 2005. I actually bought it and gave it away 4 or 5 times before I finished it myself. Now Christie and I want to give you something. All of those lessons and so many more are now interactive and available online 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year on the Gitomer Learning Academy. It has never been easier or more accessible to invest 10 minutes a day in your sales success. Go to GitomerLearningAcademy.com to check it out and send us an email to gla@thewhyandthebuy.com and we'll get you set up with a free 2-week trial. Christie and I were looking for a house band for the podcast, and we were told the Roots were busy. So we found the next best thing. They're called Haskins, and they are gigging regularly in southeastern Michigan and all the time at haskinsmusic.com. Go check them out.
You're listening to the Podcast Detroit Network. Visit www.podcastdetroit.com for more information.